When my mom moved in with us, I thought it would be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. She had sold her home to avoid financial ruin after her cancer treatments, and honestly, it felt like the right thing to do. I'm 37, my wife Mia is 35, and we'd spent years turning our house into a home, a sanctuary. We had no idea that letting Mom stay would test the very foundations of our marriage. Mom has always been the my house, my rules kind of person, even when she wasn't in her own house. At first, things were okay. We gave her the guest bedroom, and she settled in. But over time, her habits started to clash with ours. She rearranged our kitchen cabinets without asking, gave unsolicited advice on everything from our parenting style to our decor, and occasionally brought up how things were better in her old house. Then there's my brother, Nick. Nick and I have always had a complicated relationship, mostly because he struggled with addiction for years. Mom leaned on him for house repairs before she moved in with us, and he was good at it. But Mia and Nick don't see eye to eye. That meant he rarely visited, which I thought was for the best, until one weekend when Mia and I decided to go on a much-needed getaway. Mia and I hadn't taken a break in months. Between work, managing the house, and adjusting to Mom living with us, we were stretched thin. So, when Mia suggested a weekend getaway, I didn't hesitate. We packed up and left early Friday morning, excited for a couple of days to just breathe and reconnect. While we were gone, Nick decided to drop by. I figured he'd stay for a few hours, maybe help Mom with some errands or projects. What I didn't expect was to come home to a completely different living room. Our living room had been one of Mia's favorite spaces in the house. She had spent weeks designing it: navy blue walls, custom-built bookcases, and a pantry that blended perfectly into the layout. It was elegant and cozy, a reflection of her style and effort. But when we walked through the door that Sunday evening, we were met with blinding white walls and sloppy paint edges. At first, I thought it was a joke. The navy walls were gone, replaced by what looked like a rushed paint job. The bookcases? They were practically ruined, with white paint dripping into the grain of the wood. I stared in disbelief, hoping it wasn't as bad as it looked. Mia was the first to speak. Her voice cracked as she said, "What happened?" That's when Mom walked in, her face lighting up like she'd just given us the best gift ever. "Do you like it?" she asked. Nick and I thought the room needed brightening up. It's so much more cheerful now. Mia's face fell, and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. "You painted without asking?" she said, her voice shaking. "Do you know how much work went into this? How much we paid to have it done right?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's just paint. We thought you'd love it. And Nick did most of the work. It's not like it cost you anything." That's when Nick sauntered in, proud as a peacock. "Yeah, man, it looks way better. You're welcome." I didn't know what to say. The tension in the room was suffocating. Mia stormed upstairs and I followed her, leaving Mom and Nick behind. When I found Mia sitting on the bed, her head in her hands, she was crying softly. "This isn't just about the paint," she said, her voice muffled. "It's about respect. This is our home, and they just took over like it's theirs. I can't do this, Ryan. Something has to change." Hat night, Mia barely spoke to me. I could tell she was holding back, trying to process everything without completely losing it. I wanted to comfort her, but what could I say? My mom and brother had crossed a line, and I hadn't stopped them. The next morning, I went downstairs to talk to Mom. She was sitting at the dining table, sipping her coffee like nothing had happened. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning. Doesn't the living room look so much better? It's so much brighter now." I took a deep breath, feeling my frustration bubble just beneath the surface. "Mom, you can't just make changes to our house without asking. That living room meant a lot to Mia. You should have waited until we were home to talk about it." She frowned, her smile fading. "Ryan, it's just paint. I don't see why Mia's making such a big deal out of it. She's always so sensitive." Her words hit me like a slap. "It's not just about the paint. It's about respect. This is our home, and you went behind our backs. You should have known better." Mom set her coffee down with a loud clink. "I was trying to help. I thought you'd appreciate me and Nick putting in the effort. But clearly, nothing I do is good enough for Mia." At that moment, Nick walked in, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. "What's all the fuss about now?" he asked, grabbing a piece of toast from the counter. I shot him a look. "The fuss, Nick, is about you and Mom deciding to repaint an entire room without asking. Do you have any idea how much damage you caused? Those bookcases alone were custom made." He shrugged, unbothered. "It's just paint, bro. Chill out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sheer lack of accountability from both of them left me speechless. When Mia came downstairs a few minutes later, her face was calm, but her eyes told a different story. "I've already called the contractor," she said, her voice steady. "They're coming out this week to assess the damage and give us an estimate." Mom's eyes widened. "Damage? Mia, it's paint, not a wrecking ball. Don't be so dramatic." Mia ignored her, turning to me instead. "Ryan, we need to talk about boundaries." I nodded. "You're right." That afternoon, Mia made another call, to her sister-in-law, a lawyer. By the end of the day, she'd already started drafting legal documents, including an eviction notice for my mom. It felt drastic, but I couldn't blame her. Later that night, Mom approached me. She was visibly upset. "Are you seriously going to let her do this? Evict me, after everything I've been through?" I sighed. "Mom, you crossed a line. This isn't just about the paint. It's about boundaries and respect. You've been living here rent-free, and instead of being grateful, you've ignored our rules. I can't keep putting Mia through this." Her face hardened. "I'll contest it. I have rights, Ryan." "Then maybe it's time to lawyer up," I said quietly. It was the first time I'd ever spoken to her like that, and as much as it hurt, I knew it had to be said. The next few days felt like living in a pressure cooker. Mia installed cameras in the house, saying it was for peace of mind. I couldn't argue. After what had happened, she wasn't taking any chances. Meanwhile, Mom stayed holed up in the guest room, and Nick stopped coming around altogether. The silence between us all was deafening. Then, the contractor showed up. He walked into the living room, took one look, and shook his head. "This is bad," he said, running his hand along the now ruined bookcases. "The paint seeped into the wood grain. We'll have to sand them down and refinish everything. It won't be cheap." Mia's jaw tightened, but she didn't say a word. I could tell she was trying to keep it together. After the contractor left, she turned to me. "Ryan, this isn't just about the cost. This is about them thinking they could do whatever they wanted in our home. I can't live like this anymore." "I know," I said softly. By the end of the week, the legal eviction notice was served to my mom. It was like dropping a bomb in the middle of our house. Mom stormed into the kitchen, the paper crumpled in her fist. "Are you serious right now, Ryan? An eviction notice? I'm your mother." "I know, Mom," I said, trying to stay calm. "But you left us no choice." "No choice?" she spat. "You're letting Mia throw me out over a paint job?" "It's not just the paint." My voice rose despite myself. "You've been overstepping since the day you moved in. You rearranged our house, you ignore our boundaries, and now you've caused thousands of dollars in damage. Mia's been more patient than I ever could have been." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but her tone stayed sharp. "Do you have any idea what this will do to me? With an eviction on my record, I'll never find another place to live. You're ruining my life." "I'm not ruining anything, Mom," I said firmly. "You made these choices, and now you have to deal with the consequences." She glared at me, shaking her head. "You're not the son I raised." "Maybe not," I replied. "But I'm the husband Mia needs me to be right now." Later that night, Nick called. "You seriously signed off on this?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "I did," I said. "Mom has rights, you know," he shot back. "Then tell her to get a lawyer," I said. "Because I'm not backing down on this. I won't let her keep disrespecting Mia and our home." Nick muttered something under his breath and hung up. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally standing up for my family, but that didn't make it any easier. The fallout from serving the eviction notice hit hard and fast. Mom doubled down on her refusal to leave, saying she'd contest it in court. Meanwhile, Mia pushed ahead, leaning on her sister-in-law to make sure everything was airtight. I felt like a referee in a match I didn't want to be part of, but I knew there was no neutral ground left to stand on. Mom's tone shifted from defensive to manipulative. She'd sit in the living room, ironically the one she'd ruined, and make comments loud enough for Mia to hear. "I guess I'll be homeless soon," she'd sigh dramatically. "It's such a shame when family turns on you." Mia, to her credit, stayed composed, but I could tell it was eating at her. One night, after another one of Mom's guilt trips, she finally broke. "Ryan, I can't do this anymore. Every day feels like a battle in my own home." I sat next to her on the couch, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on us. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry it's come to this, but we're doing the right thing. She can't keep crossing these lines." Mia gave a sad smile. "I just wish it didn't have to be this messy." The tension reached its peak when a court date was set for the eviction. Mom insisted on representing herself, convinced that she'd be able to talk her way out of it. "Judges understand family situations," she said with misplaced confidence. "They won't throw me out." When the day arrived, Mia and I sat in the courtroom, side by side. Mom walked in, her face set with determination. I couldn't believe how far things had escalated. The hearing was straightforward. The judge listened to both sides. Mia's lawyer laid out the case with precision, detailing the property damage and the violation of our boundaries. Mom, on the other hand, leaned heavily on emotional appeals. "I'm a cancer survivor," she said, her voice quivering. "I've lost everything. My home, my health. My son and his wife took me in, and now they want to throw me out like trash." Mia's lawyer stayed calm, countering with facts. "While we empathize with her situation, the defendants have a right to protect their property and enforce boundaries in their home. This is not about a lack of compassion. It's about maintaining respect and accountability." The judge deliberated briefly before ruling in our favor. Mom was given 30 days to vacate the property. After the ruling, Mom barely looked at me. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly as we left the courtroom. I didn't respond. What was there to say? The 30 days came and went in a blur of tension and silence. Mom kept to herself for the most part, but every now and then, she'd drop a passive-aggressive comment or slam a door just hard enough to remind us she was still angry. I tried to give her space, but the house felt like a battlefield, and we were all just trying to make it to the finish line. When the day finally came for her to leave, it was surreal. She packed up her things with Nick's help, though he made sure to avoid both me and Mia the entire time. I offered to help once, and Mom just gave me a sharp look. "You've done enough," she said coldly. As she walked out the door with her last bag, she turned back to look at me. "You'll regret this one day, Ryan," she said. "Family is all you've got." I didn't respond. I just stood there as she got into Nick's car and drove away. The house was quiet after that. Too quiet. For all the stress she'd caused, her absence was still a heavy thing to process. Mia and I spent the next few weeks trying to put our lives back together. The contractor finished the repairs in the living room, and it finally looked like it used to. Our safe, cozy space. But the emotional scars weren't so easy to fix. One night, as we sat on the couch, Mia turned to me. "Do you think she'll ever forgive us?" I sighed. "I don't know. But we did what we had to do. We can't keep sacrificing our peace for someone who doesn't respect us." Mia nodded, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. "I just wish things had been different." "Me too," I admitted. "But I also know this was the right thing for us, for our family." We've started talking about boundaries more openly since then, not just with each other, but with everyone in our lives. This whole ordeal taught me the importance of standing firm, even when it's hard. As for Mom, I haven't heard from her since she left. Nick sent a few texts, mostly angry ones, but I haven't replied. I know the door to reconciliation isn't closed forever, but for now, we need the space to heal. Looking back, I wish I'd handled things differently from the start. I should have set clearer boundaries when Mom first moved in. Maybe then we could have avoided this whole mess. But hindsight's 20/20, and all I can do now is learn from the experience. Mia and I are stronger for it, though. Our marriage has weathered a storm I never saw coming, and it's made me realize just how much she means to me. If I had to choose between keeping the peace with my family or protecting the life we've built together, I'd choose her every time. Because at the end of the day, home isn't just a place. It's the people who make you feel safe, respected, and loved. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect that. Story 2. 3 years after our divorce, my unfaithful ex-wife, who had left me penniless, returned with a vengeance, demanding half of my lottery winnings and hauling me to court. I thus made sure she felt bad about it. I'm 39 years old, and I wouldn't have believed it if you had told me a few years ago that I would win the lotto. I was at my lowest point at the time, having just gotten divorced, barely making ends meet, and feeling like everyone was against me. The harsh terms of our divorce settlement allowed my ex-wife to walk away with a portion of my assets and money. I attempted to reconstruct my life piece by piece at the time, packing up my few possessions and accepting the court's decision. I never thought she would come back more avaricious than before. When I eventually struck it lucky, the lottery victory came as a sudden and unexpected jolt. I impulsively purchased a ticket. At a petrol stop, one of those impromptu choices. I shoved it in my jacket pocket and didn't think about it until the winning numbers were revealed on the evening news. Even so, I took my time checking it. But the following morning, bored, I did so. When the numbers lined up, my heart almost burst. Although it wasn't an incredible billion-dollar prize, it was sufficient. Millions that have the power to transform someone's life forever, especially someone like myself who is just starting off. I followed all the procedures exactly, got a trustworthy lawyer, concealed my name as far as possible, and made a strategy to manage the funds sensibly. I paid off some outstanding obligations, bought a new car, and moved up to a small house. However, I didn't go on an extravagant shopping binge. I knew better than to flaunt my newfound money since I had already been burnt by foolish trust. Only a select group of close pals were aware. Certainly not on that list was my ex-wife. 3 years later, fast forward. I had invested part of the earnings, given to a few nearby organizations, and was living a peaceful, comfortable life while I felt secure. And then, suddenly, I received a call from an unidentified number. I got shivers from the voice on the other end. My ex-wife was the one. As if no time had gone, she gave me a sugary greeting. "How are you?" She caught me off guard and inquired as if we were old friends. I inquired about her desires, using platitudes like, "I miss you," "I wonder how life has treated me," and so on. She skirted a question. I get right to the point. "You're phoning, but why?" After a moment of hesitation, she dropped a bomb. "I've heard that you're wealthy. Do you mind if we—" Me. I kept hearing my lawyer's cautions. You have money once people stop sniffing. Like vultures, they circle about. She persisted, saying she wanted to discuss unresolved issues from our marriage, even though I told her I was busy. It was absurd. Our divorce was final. I hung up, uneasy, but determined not to allow her to wiggle her way back in because I sensed problems. She arrived to my house without warning a week later, leaning against a shiny rental car in my driveway. She smiled wryly at me. "You won the lotto, but I guess you neglected to mention it." "Faux casual," she replied, entering as though she had been welcomed. I refused to back down. "We are no longer wed. You don't care about my finances." She looked around my newly renovated living room and sneered. "Oh, now look at you. Better furnishings, new location. It must be pleasant." I prepared myself for any angle she could choose to employ. She sat on my couch, crossed her legs like if she had a home, and began to twirl her tail. She expressed grief at the disappearance of life following a divorce. She believed that after realizing how unique we were, we might maybe start afresh. However, she continued to glance about the room, observing the improvements, which confirmed her thoughts that I was, in fact, in a better financial position. A shiver of ancient resentment ran through me. This was the same woman who betrayed me and then harassed me for every penny in court. She now desired another opportunity. I politely requested her to go. She declined. She used the discussion to her advantage by saying she had fallen on hard times, was unemployed, and was late on her obligations. And she heard about my sudden money from someone. My rage boiled over as she talked more. At last, she remarked, "Look, I believe I have a right to the winnings from the parlor lottery." We were married, after all. I almost burst out laughing. 3 years have passed since our divorce. Remember how you broke me? She gestured with her hand. That was not the same. You now own money that, in a sense, we ought to have shared. The level of entitlement was astounding. She said it was only fair and requested a sizable check, half to be exact. She said, "You wouldn't be where you are without me. We spent years together." I reminded her that the lottery windfall occurred long after we split up, that she had cheated, and that the divorce was official. She didn't care about any of that. She insisted that certain states have rules pertaining to marital assets if one is found within a specific time frame and threatened legal action. I pointed out the time frame and called that bluff. Long after the divorce was finalized, the ticket was bought and the prizes were claimed. The law didn't help her, no matter how hard she tried. However, she grinned, perhaps already formulating a new strategy. I received court documents a few days later. She was suing me, saying my lotto winnings were hidden, unreported wins, or marital property during a divorce. I was so frustrated that I almost struck a wall. My lawyer told me that if I displayed the chronology and the winning ticket's official date, I shouldn't be afraid. However, it still meant that we would have to appear in court, which was a difficult and time-consuming process. After realizing she had no legal standing, I half expected her to dismiss the matter, but she persisted, perhaps in the hopes of reaching a settlement. Perhaps she was counting on me, giving in to save money on legal bills or exposure. She increased the pressure on me at the same time by sending me deceptive SMS. "You owe me for our marriage's emotional suffering, or do you not wish to act morally?" She even attempted to be guilty. "I've heard that generosity has always been instilled in your father's side of the family, or am I exempt from that?" My attorney told me to remain composed. Keep a record of everything and get ready for the hearing. I couldn't help but think of how her treachery had left me emotionally and financially devastated. I had slept on a friend's couch that night because I was short on rent, and now she came stomping back, demanding half of the money she never earned or had any right to. I was filled with wrath and fear when I arrived at the courthouse on the morning of the hearing. I was met on the stairs by my lawyer, who nodded reassuringly. When I entered, I saw my ex-wife leaning against a marble column, looking confident and well-dressed. Her new lawyer strode about, leafing through documents. She scoffed as if to say, "We'll see who wins," when our eyes met. The action started. Her lawyer made up a tale about how we were married for years, how I had concealed the winning date, or how she had purportedly bought the winning ticket before the divorce was finalized. They attempted to portray me as dishonest by saying I had always intended to conceal the prize. Almost a year after our divorce was finalized, my lawyer coolly delivered the official lottery document, replete with the purchase date, claiming date, and my bank statements that demonstrated how the deposit happened. He said that there was no crossover with marital assets, and that her claim lacked foundation. After carefully examining the facts, the judge nodded. When my ex entered the stand, she started crying as she talked about how she felt betrayed and how she thought our future would be together. The judge probed sharply. "On this date, did you and your ex-husband complete your divorce?" "Yes," she acknowledged. "Did you buy a lottery ticket and then claim it?" She tried to play on emotions by saying she helped me and that she was the reason I even had the money to purchase a ticket, when she was forced to acknowledge what the documentation showed. The judge was unconvinced. I observed with a peculiar mixture of delight and sympathy. She believed that a moving performance may influence the court, but the truth was what it was. The time frame was emphasized by my lawyer. The absence of legal status for assets acquired after a divorce. The court then rendered his judgment, dismissing her complaint as without merit. Before the gavel dropped, he firmly advised her to stop pursuing this case further and chastised her for squandering the court's time. Her lawyer attempted a last-ditch appeal request. The court dismissed it, stating that there was no basis for further action. Anger blazed across my ex-wife's face. She gave me a fierce look as though I had personally deceived her once more. I ignore her mute rage, steeling myself. My lawyer congratulated me and shook my hand. I let out a breath. Relief is pouring in. However, the drama was far from ended. She accosted me in the corridor outside the courthouse. Her voice was nasty and low. She said, "You'll regret making me look foolish." I simply shrugged. "You brought me to court without reason, thus you did it yourself." She threatened to ruin my life again and cursed me. I could see the hollowness of her warnings. She had run out of cards in the weeks after the court's decision. I had a fresh sense of independence. After a disastrous attempt to seize half of my lottery winnings, my ex-wife was left with legal bills and a reputation for pointless lawsuits. Most of my friends and acquaintances who learned about the scandal agreed with me, seeing how dishonest her demand was. However, she attempted to fabricate a tearful tale about how I had somehow defrauded her of a huge fortune. However, not many people accepted it. I'm not gonna lie. Years after our divorce, there was a certain joy in seeing her scheme fall apart. I had reenacted the treachery of her infidelity, how she left me without money. I was tormented by it, but I put a lot of effort into getting out of that hole. Then luck struck in the shape of winning the lottery. Ironically, her coming back to try to take half of us felt like a twisted coda to our marriage after she had been gone for a long time. Justice has now been done. She ended herself paying for her own legal fees in addition to failing. You could ask whether I felt sorry for her. A tiny part of me realized she may be having financial difficulties. She did this crazy stunt out of desperation. The bigger picture, however, was that she had not expressed regret for her previous actions. She asked for something she didn't have. I attempted to deceive the court for my own benefit. Sympathy for such conduct. Difficult to muster. To prevent legal drama, some individuals wondered whether I thought about making her a settlement offer. The solution? Not at all. She cheated and depleted my funds, leaving me in the dust with no legitimate claim to my post-divorce fortune. So no, especially when she attempted to undermine me once more, I wasn't going to give her a single dime. I'm leading a more tranquil life now. I avoid showing off my wealth, invest my profits wisely, and maintain a low profile. The recollection of my ex-wife's avarice serves as a warning against placing too much faith in people, and underestimates the extent to which entitlement may influence someone. If her scheme had worked, half of my salary would be stolen from me. She was humiliated in court instead, and I can't apologize for it. We previously exchanged vows, but every now and then there are reports that she's complaining about my coldness, so I cut her off. However, she used the same reasoning to support her first demand. Her treachery renders a pledge meaningless. As soon as she cheated and drained me of all my money, she lost all moral and legal support for the divorce. Only when she scented money did she start sniffing about. I eventually made sure she felt bad about bringing me to court. She received nothing. The judge accepted her defeat, and while she was forced to suffer the repercussions of her avarice, my life went on. A quintessential case of someone attempting to have it both ways, only to suffer a significant loss. It served as a reminder to me that sometimes seeking retribution simply means allowing justice to carry out its course. And the law was on my side in this instance. There isn't a more satisfactory ending in my mind